Toni Doolen, and I'm an associate professor in mechanical, industrial, and manufacturing engineering, but I teach primarily in industrial and manufacturing engineering. I was born and spent the first 18 years of my life in Billings, Montana, and I did my undergraduate studies at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. And then after I finished my bachelor's degree, I moved to Northern California and worked in Silicon Valley for Hewlett-Packard. And while I was at Hewlett-Packard, I had an opportunity to go back and get a master's degree at Stanford in manufacturing systems engineering. And then I moved to Corvallis in 1994, and then eventually went back and got my PhD here at Oregon State in industrial engineering. So, for me, a really large influence was like where I went to my undergrad, Cornell. I applied there in part because I had an older brother who went there, and we had taken him out to school there, and I just thought it was a beautiful campus. And then my freshman year, I took a class in material science and engineering because that's what his degree is, and I wanted to find out what he was doing, and I ended up really liking it, so I switched from the College of Arts and Science to the College of Engineering. But growing up, my mom and dad were really supportive of doing well in school, and that was something that they valued a lot. So I placed a high value on being successful academically in school, and they were very supportive when I wanted to, go away from Montana and go all the way to New York to go to school and study there. So I would say between my older brother and my parents, they were very influential in kind of stressing the importance of a college education and education in general. Oh, that's an interesting question. So my decision to leave industry and come back and work on my PhD and then move from industry to academia has a lot to do with what I thought was important to do in life. I really enjoyed my work in industry. I was an individual contributor as well as a manager, but I just felt like it was hard to, by the time people are taking even their first job, they've made a lot of decisions about their life and choices, and so as a manager you could help them develop as individuals and as technical contributors, but you're kind of late because they've already made so many choices. And so one of my goals in coming back to work on my PhD and then transitioning to academia was to be able to work with young people before they made all of the choices that they've made by the time they get to the work environment, and in particular to try to help young people see the value of going into a field like engineering. I think that for me it's been, it was a decision to study engineering that's led me to a lot of great opportunities, so I want to have the opportunity to influence other young people to have those same opportunities. One of the goals I had coming in was to make sure that my research and my technical contributions, as well as my contributions in the classroom and service, were of high enough quality to be able to get tenure so that you can, positively influence things at, within your unit at the university. And so having gone through the first set of that, so I got tenure last year, kind of what I'm looking at now is how do I pick and choose things to work on that have the most influence. And some of that might be at a curriculum level, some of it's at a research level, but at this point, I'm just very choosy about what I do because I want to make sure I'm spending my time on things that have a direct impact, for example, on our undergraduates. I want to teach classes and do curriculum development in ways that I know will be create a class that's a better experience for the student. So my own development has to do with making sure I have kind of the skills and the network to be able to do that. So in my play, I'm passionate about golf and being out there doing active things. I like playing soccer. In my play, I love hanging out with my kids. I have 14, almost 15-year-old, and then 13-year-old twins, and so I like to have enough flexibility to spend time with them and all of their play activities. In my work, I would say I'm really mostly passionate about things where I feel like I can make a contribution. And so in my research, for example, I've done a lot of different things with work groups and trying to figure out how to improve the management of organizations. and I continue to be really passionate about that, and I think that's an area where engineers have a lot to contribute, even though it's an area that maybe traditionally has been explored more by social scientists, and so that's something I'm interested in, and I'm always looking for new opportunities. The other thing I'm really passionate about at the workplace is making sure that in the way that I teach courses, I engage students. So I spend a lot of time figuring out in the classroom, how do I get it so I'm not just standing up there talking for an hour and 50 minutes, but that students are really engaged in the conversation. Because at the end of the day, I think that students need to take what we're doing into the classroom and be able to really apply it and not feel like the classes are just a box that they're trying to check. And since I worked in industry, largely in manufacturing, a lot of my research has to do with manufacturing organizations, but there's more and more of a need to apply some of what we've learned in manufacturing to healthcare and healthcare sectors. So that's an area I'm interested in. Part of what I'm trying to figure out now is how to come up that learning curve, because I haven't worked in healthcare myself. So how do I learn about the healthcare sector not having worked in that sector before? I think for women who choose to study in fields like engineering, that absolutely you're going to face all sorts of both subtle and not so subtle discrimination, in the sense that people don't think that you belong because you don't look like an engineer is supposed to look, and how is it that you can have the capabilities that you need to be an engineer. And what I would say is, in terms of how I've dealt with that both in industry and at Oregon State, you have to pick and choose carefully when those situations happen what you're going to do. If you find that you begin to feel like everybody has it out for you, I don't think you can be successful. But when things happen that are discrimination either against you or one of your colleagues, you have to decide if that's a point in time where you can take a stand. And just as I've become more mature and had more opportunities to both experience and hear from women who've experienced discrimination based on their gender, I'm a lot less tolerant now, but I'm also, I think, better at helping people recognize when they are behaving in a way that's discriminatory and they don't necessarily know it. So one of the things I find myself doing frequently at meetings now with my colleagues is when they, for example, always use the word he when talking about engineers or professionals, I'll add or she, and part of that's just awareness. They don't even know that they're doing it. And I kind of feel like being in a tenured faculty position, part of what you have to do is raise awareness, and maybe by hearing me in a faculty meeting say or she, when they go to their classroom they won't always use he, that occasionally they'll use she. I would say the most important thing to do is to find other women that as you go through the process and as you encounter situations that have no bearing on your own capabilities, basically how you can deal with that. And I think, you can have male friends, but to a certain extent it's really difficult for them to relate to what it feels like to be, one of 40 or, 2 of 100 or whatever you're going to end up being. So I think it really is important to reach out and find other women. Absolutely. As soon as any woman who chooses to study engineering, I think, is a role model of sorts, because there are so few women in the pipeline. And certainly in coming to academia, where the numbers of women in faculty positions is really low, whether or not you want to be, you are. And that's, for me, that was one of the reasons for coming back, is being able to be in that role of mentoring and helping people in this early phase. The thing that you realize, though, is even though you're a role model, the choices I've made and what's important to me, that's not the same for everybody. And so some people will look at me and say, oh, I never want to be like that. But I think for other people, they can relate to choices I've made, and that might help them in making their choices. So I view myself as that, but I also know that my solution to life's challenges are not universal solutions. They're not going to work for everybody.